So today I'm going to talk about my labor and delivery and my experience with that. Just to give you guys some backstory, as you guys know in a former video, um, I I was a surrogate. I carried twins and I had them delivered by C-section. And then I got pregnant like 6 months after having them. And when I had found out that I was pregnant again, I immediately talked to my doctor. I was like, look, I'm only like 6 months postpartum. Is this okay? Am I gonna be okay? Do I have to have another C-section? I keep yawning. Or can I have a VBAC? And which is another vaginal delivery, because my firstborn, I had her, vaginally. So I was hoping like I could do that again. And the doctor was just like, yeah, that's not an issue. We can go ahead and schedule that. So I was medically cleared in advance and going to my doctor's appointments. And when I went to my doctor's appointments towards the end, I asked the doctor, am I okay to have a VBAC? Am I okay? Am I okay? And he was like, yes, you can have a VBAC. I saw 2 doctors. They both were like, yeah, you're okay to do that. And we set a plan. We had a plan. And it was, I can have a VBAC. So mothers to be and moms who've already had a baby know, or you should know, that when you go into labor, when you go into the hospital, they put these monitors on top of your stomach. So there's the monitor that they put on to monitor the baby's heart rate. And if you're contracting, there's a secondary monitor that they put on to monitor how often the contractions are. And that's standard. So they told me that, like, okay, when you go into labor, we're gonna have those monitors set up. I was like, great. But because I had a C-section before, they were like, when you dilate to 5 centimeters, we're going to insert some monitors on the inside to monitor the strength of the contractions. Not the consistency, but the strength. Just because they wanted to make sure that they didn't get too strong. And I said, great, because if they got too strong, that could lead to other problems. Great, cool, that was set. I was going to my checkups. They were like, okay, you're not dilating, you're not anything. So we had already started planning for a C-section just in case. Because if you've already had a C-section, they can't induce your labor. You either have to go into it naturally or you have to have another C-section. So because I wasn't dilating or anything at I was already 38 weeks going on 39 and nothing. So we started planning for that following week for my C-section to get set up. My due date was June 21st. That was my due date. I started having contractions and going into active labor June 15th. We left the house probably around, I don't even know, I want to say like 8 or 9 o'clock. If that, I can't remember what time it was. It was later in the night. It was Saturday, June 15th. And I was having contractions. I was timing them myself, so they were like every 4 to 5 minutes apart. And I couldn't take it anymore because they hurt so much. And the difference between these contractions versus like my first 2 pregnancies is that they were just more intense. And I was in a lot of pain. And we get to the hospital, and the ride to the hospital was like the most excruciating thing. All the bumps, the stop, the go, the jerking, and like it was too much. So we finally get there. We get me into the hospital. My dad like runs to go get a wheelchair, and he like brings it to me, and I sit down, and they take me and check in. We go through all of that stuff, and we I finally get into the hospital room, they check me. They're like, oh, you're barely 1.5 centimeters. But I was like, how, like, I can't go home. They were like, if you need to dilate more in order for us to keep you. I was like, okay, so what does that mean? So they were like, okay, this is what we're gonna do. We're going to keep you for a few hours, see if your labor progresses, if you start dilating a little more. If you do, we'll keep you. If not, we need to send you home, and then you'll come back once the contractions get a little bit closer in time, and we'll see how it goes from there. So they checked me. I was 1.5 centimeters. But like I said, my contractions were so painful. I felt like I was already at complete, like 10, like a whole, like I was like about to have her. I was like in tears. I couldn't take it. So I begged the nurse, and I asked her, I was like, can you give me anything? Can you give me some form of pain medication? Because I know I can't have an epidural yet. And she could tell like I was just like, I wasn't faking it. So she gave me some morphine, and she's just like, that should relax you enough to get you to a point where we'll come back and we'll check you again. I said, great. So I remember just being semi-relaxed, probably enough to just kind of rest. And then it started to wear off. Oh my God. It started to wear off, and the pain was like so much more. And you know how they ask you at the hospital, rate your pain through a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest? As soon as the morphine wore off, I was at a 10. And they came in, they checked me, I was at a 5. And they were like, oh, okay, you know, we're gonna keep you, we're gonna admit you in. I said, great. So then you're in the middle of fucking labor, and they're giving you these paperworks to sign. So I was like, no. So I'm just trying to get through each contraction. They were probably every minute to 30 seconds apart. And then I remember laying in the hospital bed, and the rails on the side, I remember just clenching to my left side, like to the rail, and I remember just holding it, because you feel the contraction coming, you feel it all just tighten up, and then it hits, and when it hits, it's just like your body kind of like seizes up, and you can't do anything. It just, I can't even explain the pain of it. And I remember just feeling like, just like pulling myself up this bed, thinking like I could pull myself away from the pain, and just it hurting. And I was just like, I can't do it. So luckily when they checked me, I was 5 going into 6 centimeters, and that's around the time they can give you the epidural. So they're like, okay, we're gonna bring the anesthesiologist in. He came in, gave me the epidural, and then he was just like, okay, it's gonna take a few minutes for it to fully like take effect, and then you should be fine. No, it did not fully take effect, because they put it in like, it's this cold sensation you could feel just like running through your back. And I remember laying there, and I was telling the nurse, I was just like, my left leg is completely numb. I don't feel anything in my left leg, but I could still feel everything in my right leg. And the nurse was just like, okay, well, let's flip you to your right side and allow it to like try to travel down to the right side of your body. So I moved, and it didn't help. It didn't help at all. And she's just like, oh, it's okay. Like, we're gonna get, as long as you don't feel anything, you know, like contraction wise, you're fine. I could still feel those bitches, right? Like, those shits were strong, and they hurt. They hurt so much. And I don't really recall much after that. Like, I just remember being in a lot of pain and just like, just trying to breathe through them. But you can't, because it hits you so hard that you tense up, and I would like hold my breath. And they're like, you need to breathe, and they make it seem so easy, but no, I can't breathe. I'm like, my body's forcing me to push, and you hold your breath when you push. I do. So the next thing I know, the doctors come in and they're like, okay, it's time to start pushing. So they obviously help lift my legs into the whatever they're called, and I put my right leg, because I can move my right leg, so I just lifted it and I put it up. But my left leg, I had no feeling, so I couldn't lift it. And this is when everything really starts to like dawn on me that something wasn't right. So they were like, okay, you're gonna start pushing. So obviously, if you've seen any movies, if you've given birth, or just like kind of like common knowledge that when you're having a baby, you have to bring your legs up and then you push, like you bring them in and you have to push down, you know, my little example. And they're like, okay, bring your legs as high up as possible. So you're laying back and they're telling me to bring my legs in, and I can't feel my left leg. I can't really feel anything, but I can feel the pain of the contractions, and I can feel pain and discomfort, but I can't feel how strong I'm actually pushing. And I'm pushing and I'm pushing and I'm clenching my jaw and I'm tensing up. And they were like, great, keep going, hold, you know, hold for 10 seconds, you know, all of that stuff. My boyfriend, my mom, and my daughter's godmother was in the room. And they were like, oh, we can see hair, we can see her head. They're like, keep going. And then I kind of just started losing focus. They kept telling me, keep pushing, but I got to a point where I couldn't even force myself to push anymore. I was just laying there and I just felt so lifeless. And the nurses were like, okay, we need you to keep trying. And I remember crying, like, I can't, like, the pain hurts. The pain hurts so bad. It's just worse than anything I've ever felt in my life. So what they do is they lay me on my back, and then because I can't really move my lower body, the nurses flip me to my left side, and a contraction hit, and I was just holding on to the rail, and I was just pulling myself in, and I was holding it, and I was like crying, and I remember just screaming out, like, I can't do it anymore. I can't. I remember turning to my boyfriend on my side, and I was just like, I don't care anymore. I don't care. Like, I'd rather have the C-section. Just let me have the C-section. And they were like telling me, no, you need to keep pushing. You need to keep pushing. So I'm laying on my side, and the doctors and the nurses are bringing my leg up to my chest, and they were kind of pushing down on me, forcing me to push as I'm holding this rail, just crying out, like, it hurts too much, please, like, stop, it hurts. Then they flipped me to my right side. They made me do it all over again, forcing me to push. Nothing. Then they flipped me back to my left side, kept forcing me to push. And I remember at one point I was grabbing this rail, and I just remember praying. I just started praying and just begging God, please let me get through this. Please let me get through this. Please let me have this baby. Please let her come out okay and allow us to just be safe. Like, I wanted to get through my delivery safe, and then it just went black. And I don't remember anything really from that point. From my point of view, it went black, and next thing I know, I'm laying flat on my back, and it's like in a movie where it just shows like the lights like just going over your head, and you just see just like these glimpses of lights, and that's exactly what I experienced. I just saw these flashes of lights, and then the next thing I know, I see this like hand go over my face with a mask, and I remember just choking on it because the air was so thick. And then I woke up. I woke up in recovery to like all these blankets on me, my boyfriend next to me, and like a doctor or somebody was on the side of me. I don't remember who it was, but I just remember Ruben being right there and not understanding anything, not having any knowledge of what happened. Like, literally the last thing I remember doing was being forced to push in my room and just crying out how much it hurt, and that was it. That's all I remember. And then I started to just like wake up, and I got told the worst news of my life. Well, I was pushing and I was pushing and I was begging them to stop. At some point, they never inserted the monitors on the inside of me to monitor the strength of my contractions. The monitor that was detecting how often my contractions were on the outside of my stomach stopped working. So they weren't even monitoring that. They were just forcing me to push. The monitor that monitored my daughter's heart rate showed that her heart rate had started to drop significantly. And they could tell that I was out of, like, in and out of consciousness, and I wasn't pushing, and I wasn't really doing anything anymore. They called a doctor in, and I guess the doctor just like looked over the nurse's shoulder from what I was told and just saw me and was just like, no, we gotta go, and kicked my family out of the delivery room. And they weren't told anything. They were just kicked out and sent to the waiting room down the hall. And I was transported from the delivery room to the OR, or the operating room. And they didn't tell them anything. All they heard over the speakers in the hospital was code white, code white. And just doctors and nurses were just running everywhere and rushing into the room that I had just got moved into. And, you know, being unconscious, not knowing what was going on, from my family's point of view, they had no idea, and they were freaking out. And my mom Googles everything, so she told me she was Googling what code white meant. And my boyfriend was like pacing the hallways, and they could see the doors opening and closing, and they were just like seeing like doctors and nurses running around, and that was it. They didn't know. At some point from me pushing, being moved to the operating room, and being on the operating table, my uterus erupted. I had a uterine rupture, and that means that my uterus opened up inside of me, and my daughter went from being inside of it to just literally floating inside of my abdomen, inside of my intestines, just inside of me. And the doctors had 10 minutes from when they got me on that table to open me up and get my daughter out. And they got her out in 9 minutes, from what I was told. When my daughter was born, she was born without a heart rate. She was born flatlined. It took them about 12 minutes, they said, to resuscitate her. My daughter was dead for a solid 10 to 12 minutes. They revived her. They brought her back. They sewed me up, brought her back. I went into recovery, and that's when I woke up. They told my boyfriend that our daughter had a 50-50 chance of surviving that first day. 50-50 chance. And it destroyed him. It destroyed my family. They were able to they put her in the NICU, like those boxes, or like, I'm calling them boxes. I don't know what they're called. Incubators, I think they're called. She had all these wires and tubes and stuff connected to her, and they told my family, because of the trauma that I went through and that she went through, and she was born without a heart rate, they had to resuscitate her. I delivered her here in Riverside, California. They had to transport her to Downey, and she had to undergo a cooling treatment. And they had to take her like right away. I had woke up from recovery. I don't even think I was fully awake for an hour or two before they had to take her. And seeing her the way that she was in the in that box, just so helpless, it really it messed with me, because through my whole pregnancy I was miserable. I was in so much pain, and I just kept saying, I want her out already. I just want her out. I want her out. I want her out. But never in a million years would I have wanted her to come out that way. Would I have wanted her to almost lose her life coming into this world. And as I'm talking about this, my daughter's directly behind this camera, and that's who I keep looking at when I'm looking off camera. I'm looking at her, and I can't even imagine her not being here. So I didn't get to hold her. I barely even got to see her because I was stuck in this bed. I could barely lift myself up. And they transported her. Ruben left with her, and his family followed behind, and they went down and went to the hospital and made sure that she got there safely and got everything set up with her. I stayed, obviously, in my recovery for about 2 days, being monitored, making sure that I was okay. And it was really hard. I had to FaceTime them to just see pictures or videos of her, and to talk to him, because he wasn't with me in my recovery. He was all the way down there, and it was like the hardest thing I think we could have ever gone through. And my other daughter, Mia, she was stuck home with family, not knowing what was going on, you know, not knowing that she almost lost her mother and her little sister, all in the matter of minutes, you know, seconds. So my daughter was born on Father's Day, June 16th at 7:33 a.m. And I was discharged from the hospital, I think it was Tuesday. And I don't think I was out of the hospital for more than an hour, and I was already at Downey, rushing in to see my baby. And when I got there, it was horrifying. To me, waking up out of recovery, I got the worst news ever. I was being told she flatlined. We need to take her here. We need to get her in the special treatment to make sure there's no brain damage. There's not going to be any seizures or anything wrong with her neurologically. And that to me is the worst. Like, I saw everything as the worst possible outcome. For my family, for Ruben, for everyone else who got told she had a 50-50 chance of surviving, she survived. And she was gonna continue to make it. And they needed to take her to make sure that she continues to progress, and to just monitor her and, you know, make sure she's okay. So for everyone else, it was nothing but positive. It was positivity, and, you know, it was a day-by-day thing. For me, it was nothing but the worst. It was seeing my baby just hooked up to everything, not knowing what was going on, what happened to me, how did it happen, how did we get to this point, how did she get there, why, like I just kept asking myself, why did this happen? Why did this happen to her? She's a little baby. She's so innocent. She didn't deserve it. So that's where I'm having the hardest time understanding, is because I don't remember. Our daughter was in the NICU for a week, and she started to show improvement. She had some respiratory issues. She wasn't fully breathing on her own. She was having shallow breathing, or where she was like not breathing at all. And the hospital wouldn't even let us touch her. If we did, like, we would just have to, like, just do that. We couldn't, like, rub her hand, her face. We couldn't do anything that would stimulate her body. So we were just stuck staring at her for like a week. And then once we could finally hold her, it was the most exciting moment ever. Ruben didn't shower for like that whole week. He didn't leave the hospital. He stayed by our daughter's side every single day. So I was like yawning. He stayed there with her every single day. And I would have to like force him and beg him to like leave so we could go get food. We could go take a shower. We could get some rest. And he just couldn't. He couldn't ever really bring himself to do it. And now she's home, and we are just blessed. You know, she's showing a lot of improvement. You know, and we're celebrating 1 month of life and happiness and love, and it's great. And I can't wait to keep sharing these moments and growing. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching this.